Good evening. It's good to see you all here tonight. I understand it's a little bit of a change of scenery to have me here instead. It's good to meet you, Ari. There she be. For tonight, I do tend to go by but this doesn't really seem to be a thing Sascha plans terribly far in ahead for, so it's not like she's really going to be setting up any pronoun alerts or mix-it-up commands or anything of the sort. It's going to be fairly, what's the word she likes to use, by the seat of her pants tonight. It is a beautiful landscape. There are very few locales in Stalker 2 that Sascha and I have not been absolutely fond of. Even Amber seemed to enjoy a few. It's good to meet you all. Good to see you, Raz, as well. Let me give a good shout out for my lovely bestie, or... God, that sounds so weird saying it. A shout out for our bestie, Angel Vice VT. Good to see you as well, Ziggy. To say that the past 24, 48, 72, 90... To say that the past 96 hours have been turbulent would be an understatement. To say that the past 96 hours have been turbulent would be an understatement. We've been doing the best we can. Be there for people who need us. And that's all we can do. We will simply leave it at that. We've been very, very drained between work and taking care of people close to us. As of present, I am still very, very drained, and Sascha spent much of today. That's fair, Tiana. I hope you have a lovely night. Be good to yourselves, good friend. We shall be here if you need anything. But it's been a turbulent week. Or weekend, rather. It's simply been turbulent. We've been getting rather heavily overworked at work. We've been we've realized that Sascha has had a little bit of a event horizon moment of giving a little bit too much of herself and trying a little bit hard to spread herself rather thin to be there for others. It's led to quite some difficult times as a result. This is correct. I've been around in this body since the better part of around April. I've been in this body since around 2012, but April was around the first time I actually began to speak. Or Sascha allowed me to fully speak, rather, but I did play Dear Esther with Angel, and we had a very, very nice time. I enjoyed getting to speak with her quite candidly about a variety of different topics. We both had a lot to say about things that mattered a lot to us. But this weekend, Sascha has spread herself rather thin, and in an attempt to keep the members of our community as best safeguarded, cared for, loved, and supported as they could be, she did unfortunately stretch us a little bit thin, leaving energy somewhat difficult to grab a hold of, and moments of how do I put this? Moments of security feeling rather few and far between. Tonight, we are here to abate this. Tonight, we are here not for chaos, or, I believe the word was, Operation Senseless Nightmare. No, it's actually quite ironic. I believe right after Operation Senseless Nightmare was when it all kind of started to... Operation Senseless Nightmare was an absolutely wonderful time, Sascha tells me, which is definitely an interesting sentence. For sure. Definitely an interesting sentence. But, say nothing else. Say nothing else. Tonight is not for chaos or senseless nightmares, I suppose is the word would be, or insanity or any of the other usual moments that a lot of our stream moments tend to be. Tonight is something I would like to do because Sascha, as Sascha would put it, cold chillin'. She does say that often. I don't exactly know what she means because if you're with another person, I don't really understand why you would want to be cold, but you not want to be warm, but much too in the same way, tonight is not a moment of chilling, tonight is a moment of warmth. Unfortunately, Sascha told me this campfire location would be a very nice spot to sit down and post, or, post ourselves up and simply spend some time. However, she neglected to inform me that after a crucial story event, the campfire is now out, and nobody is around to light it anymore. Which could be a problem, which means we may have to move north to the garbage to find ourselves a proper place to sit down. This we can do. We can walk until then. We can simply walk. We will walk and we will walk and we will walk. But tonight is not... You and I both know Sasha's full of interesting sentences. This is not planned for, if you'll give me a moment. "2,000 kilometers is fine." But yes, Sascha planned for this to be a little bit more of a relaxing stream, as opposed to the usual stalker chaos, and what instead happened is that she directed me to a campfire that was not, in fact, lit. This is quite alright. I am not cross with her, but... This is going to be more of a we are simply relaxing and spending time together kind of night. I think there has been enough times the past few weeks have been spent, or the past quite many Stalker Tuesdays have been spent, in which Sascha feels like she's been spending a little bit more time focusing on being crazy, which is a rather big part of why she chose to have Amber sitting next to her last week, and instead spent much of it discussing some of her favorite hyperfixations, from storm chasing and weather sirens to, I believe it was, oil refinery incidents. In actuality, our destination is in a different direction. A bomb for the soul kind of night? That's correct. Until we get there, I'm simply going to drop this away. Sascha has talked about it before, but I'm not exactly the type to be visibly perceived, which is a rather large part of why I've never really been terribly fond of appearing on stream. In Sascha's stead, I have occasionally spoken for her during very specific points on streams, and as you listen to my voice, you might notice a few little similarities, or rather differences between our inflections, and you might now find yourself going back to previous VODs to listen to my voice and beginning to recognize, I see, this is around when 80 began fronting. This is when Sascha switched out. sort of thing. And you would be well within your rights to do that. And I think you'll find I've been around on stream for far more moments than you might realize, but the unfortunate reality is that I've never really been one for being visibly perceived. When Sascha was attempting to find herself a nice little set of character portraits to use for all of the rest of us in her system, she had very little difficulty finding one for Amber, and of course, one for herself. With me, there was a fair bit more difficulty. I think she stated she simply couldn't really find a way to describe how I looked, and when she asked me, I believe she came up to me and said, "80, what do you look like?" And I said, "I don't." So, she has seen fit to primarily, she has primarily seen fit to illustrate how I look as a sort of just silhouette, but this is primarily just a go-between. This is primarily a go-between, because she feels there is at least a little bit of an obligation for me to be visually perceivable so one can visualize what I look like. As an existence within this headspace, I should have some sort of corporeality. No, but I'm not sure I agree. So, naturally, a rather large part of it is I've tended to front whenever Sascha has the screen zoomed into the game so her character model cannot be seen. Therefore, our eyes, the direction of our face, the shape of our mouth, and the exact motions of our lips and more cannot be discerned from what the model is capturing of us, and therefore I feel a little bit more comfortable making my presence known because I know that I am not being physically perceived on the same level as somebody like Sascha is. I just don't feel like I belong. So, I don't. And naturally, with the PNG model, I do admit it is a little bit more appealing, as long as people can only see when I am speaking and nothing more. That is fine. That is fine. Things move when a person speaks. Little granules of salt on a table don't move when a person turns their head or even their body, but they vibrate ever so slightly when you speak. This alone is enough justification. Visually, you could be a radio, the voice behind the desk. Sascha immediately read this and piped up about me being a PA system. I'm not sure how I feel about that. 080, the PA system of the Rebecca. Wait, but we're already a system, and oh, this introduces complications quite a bit. I suppose if I were to be a PA system, it would be a little bit closer to the one in Half-Life. I'm sure you all know it well. Sascha has talked endless love of Half-Life. That PA system that has that lovely little voice. Not sure a PA system is how I'd say it. More of a tornado siren. Sascha said I would be a Federal Signal 1000T. That's possibly the first time I've ever been told this. I suppose I'll take it. I suppose I will take it. This seems about as good a locale to set up as any. I'm not terribly interested in going much further north or west, and Lord knows the cement factory is a rather difficult place all its own. Not a bad one. Oh, no, definitely not. If you were not limited by the physical body's voice box, your voice would echo a lot more. A radio is a thing we carry transmitting your voice. I see. So the implication is more that... The implication I would understand is more that the Heku PA... Well, the Heku takes over the PA in the second half of the game after we've got hostiles. Or is it surface tension? I can't remember. The Black Mesa PA system. But generally speaking, if I'm reading this correctly, the understanding is that it's more that I would be... If you would all be carrying my voice around, but then... I'm not entirely certain. I'm not entirely certain how much further I can entertain these ways of giving corporeality to myself. Even if it means that I don't have a physical form to be visually perceived, I'm not entirely sure this is where I would like to go. It primarily just means I need a little bit more time to warm up to this concept. That being said, this works. There's enough for you all to focus on that my visual form is a little bit less distracting and less of the center. So, this is about as good as it can get. But, with us here, and things as they are, I wanted to sit down and spend some time with those we love. So tell me, how are you all managing today? As I said earlier, it's been... You don't mind if I keep the PNG off? Well, if you say so. Is that Moonlight Sonata? I think that's Moonlight Sonata on guitar. But yes, as we stated, it's been a rather tiresome week. Many people that we hold dear and find wonderful, wonderful, and important and grounding have been struggling particularly hard. Reasons are their business and nobody else's. But it has led to some rather difficult moments of us spreading ourselves rather thin at the behest of Sascha. And as a result, we have spent a great many days worrying dearly for people we care about, both for their physical safety and their emotional well-being. I think we needed this. Sascha agrees. Eepy and kinda hungry. I'm going to take this to mean sleepy or tired and rather hungry. I would agree. Today has been both a very, very difficult and draining work shift, and also a rather relaxed one, as for the better part of the first half, we were rather running around consistently. Sascha, in an interesting bout of emotions, which she described as going through from sadness into self-doubt, essentially found herself standing at the precipice of anger, and thusly chose to, quote, burn it all off by listening to a great amount of Alpha Wolf during work and throwing herself into her day job, which did work for a fair bit, but then once she realized she was rather overwhelmed attempting to manage and shoulder the burdens of others to a degree she could not, she realized she simply, having burnt all of her energy out on her anger, once she realized how overwhelmed she was with attempting to shoulder the burdens of others, she realized she didn't have a whole lot of energy to keep her going through that, and so she collapsed inwards. And so here we are. I do want it known that Sascha is doing okay. She is speaking again, she is managing fine, but she generally she preferred that I was the one to be managing this stream. She felt like I would have the best ability to keep this tone consistent throughout, rather than getting distracted and trailing off and inevitably getting very, very swept up in a great many bits, as she likes to call them. Ari says, I've been worried for my girlfriend. She's stressed out by moving out of state. I'm doing alright otherwise. Working on schoolwork, but staying home. Thursdays start my in-person school days. What an interesting time, because the last time this body was actually doing college, it was, I believe we graduated the spring semester of 2020. What an interesting time to graduate. What an interesting time. is really all that one can say. It certainly was challenging, but it is interesting now to know that for a lot of people, in-person classes are now a little bit more of an anomaly than the other way around, as it was for us. So we do hope your in-person school days go nicely. You've been working very, very hard, and we hope that you can find plenty of courage and safety going forwards, and your days are full of, I guess saying full of learning is a rather redundant statement, but we do hope that your in-person school days go as smoothly as they possibly can, and who knows, perhaps you'll find a great many enlightening little experiences in your day-to-day. Glad to hear she's okay. She needs a break. Which is interesting, as she took the better part of a week break just a week ago, but I think for the better part of it, it was rather difficult for her to truly relax on that break due to how her medication was working. For those who don't know, as she didn't discuss it a terrible amount on stream, since her move here up until the better part of late January, this body had been operating on a dosage of 200 milligrams of spironolactone, which for most trans femmes is allegedly that's interesting. For most trans femmes is allegedly a rather anomalously high dose. Apparently, the average amount of testosterone levels in a healthy assigned male at birth person who continues to identify as male is going to be around from 300 to 600. Optimally suppressed levels in a trans femme, at least according to our current provider, are sitting between 15 and 80. And our levels in this body were 11 and below. Consistent migraines, making it extremely difficult to focus. A great many anemic episodes of nearly collapsing after standing up when sitting or crouching on the ground. Short-temperedness, a propensity for negative thoughts and energy, and a great many other things, such as just general fatigue, making it difficult to commit to most things. Appear to be very easily blamable on these low levels of testosterone, as every trans femme still needs a little bit of it in their system to be able to operate. These hormones do regulate parts of the body that are required to be regulated, and without testosterone, you can find yourself in some rather bad locations. So she did spend a week relaxing, but unfortunately that week was also spent relaxing at a level of testosterone so difficult that it was basically impossible for her to recharge. If you have ever had a laptop or phone charger that simply does not hold a charge, if you can imagine a charger where you plug it in and the cable is so badly twisted that it charges your phone about a single % over the course of a day as long as you do not touch it, that was the equivalent of our body for the better part of a good month. And the fact that we were running at the level of activity we were for so consistently long and seemed to be doing rather well is, I believe, nothing short of astonishing. So, just after her birthday, Sascha had her blood work done, she had her appointment, and she chose to increase her level of progesterone to 200 from 100 and drop her level of spironolactone from 200 to 100. So she is now sitting at 2 dosages of 50 milligrams per day, which is still a fair bit more than most, but better than it was. And she's hoping soon she can simply wean herself off if need be, but unfortunately our provider does not really allow us to take any other form of anti-androgen, so it has been very difficult for her to relax, focus, and meaningfully make progress. It would explain why we haven't made a whole lot of progress on many of our creative projects. The fact that a great many things we managed to get done seemingly on a whim, from the Fall For Me music video to a great many other things, is honestly it's rather impressive that this managed to happen, but we are a little bit happier that we're not having to pop Advil every single day of our lives. Ari said, I graduated high school right before COVID, so I avoided a lot of the lockdown stuff with school. Ari said, thank you. Spironolactone, in my experience, really affected those who take it pretty severely. Absolutely. I believe Sascha at one point described it as, quote, Piss Simulator 2025. I'm not sure that's the statement I would use, but it... Somehow this stalker playing He Was a Good Stalker feels rather apt at this point. But that was a rather... It was a rather difficult time to exist in this vessel, I'll tell you that much. It was rather difficult to exist given that every single moment there was just a whole lot of noise, and it was very difficult for us to talk amongst each other due to the constant background radiation of migraines, the fatigue making it feel like all of us were kind of hooked up to some type of sapping device. It was rough, but my friend and mod Zephyra, an elder trans woman, I can quote her on saying, Spironolactone is the devil. I hope it comes through with the utmost sincerity that I too agree. Very interesting to see two stalkers phasing through each other on the right here. That's okay. Ziggy said, pretty average day on my end. Uneventful, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I would agree. I would find myself agreeing with that. How strange these times are we live in. Oh. So, I just had to escape the kitchen because cutting onions went poorly. These, for some reason, are particularly strong, and I could hardly keep my eyes open. There was a little technique we learned while working at a job with, I believe, a Tex-Mex chain, which was if you slice an onion in half and then hold the two halves under cold running water, you can neutralize the odors a fair bit, and it makes cutting it a little bit easier. Are there times that aren't strange? This is true. This is true. There was a time where I believe Sascha was cutting, was in the back room of her job while onions and jalapenos were being cut and chopped, respectively, at the same time. It was, as she put it, like World War I. Such a way with words on that one. No. I do have to say, it is, I believe, the word would be killing the vibe a little bit, that these two characters over here appear to be clipping through each other. So, perhaps we might have to do something about that. I was a dishwasher in a restaurant at one point, and when we would spray the tubs of hot sauce with water, it would sting. Absolutely. The old chain we used to work with, obviously being a mixture of southwestern cultures, was very, very priding itself on hot sauce and spicier things. Even the cheese dip tended to have jalapenos in it, so it was World War I grade onions. Wait till I tell Sascha I've got my first bit. That's new. PK Ninja, it's good to see you. Sascha wants me to shout you out, so I'm doing that. I'm afraid I am not Sascha for tonight, PK. You are actually speaking to and watching 80, but it is good to see you tonight. I hope times are faring well for you. It must be nice living up in Alberta where there's no rats. We would like an existence free of rats. I'll tell you that much. Rather than the normal programming for Stalker Tuesdays, PK, we've been keeping it rather low-key, simply. Spending our time relaxing wherever we can. There is one location we might like to spend our time at. Perhaps we will go there. Where else could one even go? There's the bar. Hello, Comtustus. Thank you once again for the resub. It was greatly appreciated. No rats, no problems. Alberta has much worse problems than rats, however. I will stay in British Columbia, where there may be rats, but it is much safer. I believe a certain robot wizard would argue that a little rats are good for your health. What's the way all of you like to put it? You may have a few rats as a treat. I don't believe I have many issues with rats. In fact, our sister, at one point, happened to own a pet rat who she loved quite a bit, and we do have to admit this rat was rather cute. Keeps the dogs engaged. No, Angel, I believe a fairly sizable catalyst for tonight is that a certain dog in this headspace has been a little bit too engaged. I would say. If she would let me, but she's glaring at me. I don't see why it's such a big deal. She likes to call herself a puppy constantly, so I don't see why it's so different when I say it. I'm being informed that eldritch possessors don't have part and parcel to be this snarky, as I'm being told. That's faux embarrassment on Sasha's end. I think you give her a little bit too much credit with the faux. I think that faux is doing a lot of work there. I would also agree, I think we do. I admit there's a certain degree of snark that, is begged of anybody, I suppose, steering the ship in this body. And if Amber gets to have her "you call that a chicane" moment, and if Mira gets to have her "end user we would like to" moment, I believe I get to have something. That foe is doing more work than Macho Man Randy Savage during that Cream of the Crop promo. I'll have to ask either you or Sascha to explain this one to me. Was Macho Man Randy Savage the racist one? Alright, Sascha is telling me that he isn't. Apparently that was Hulk Hogan. I see. I see. Given that the campfires appear to be rather consistently bogged down with rather busy stalkers, Sascha has advised me of what she calls the #1 smoke spot in the zone. I'm not sure if I should take her up on this. Macho Man was just doing a lot of cocaine. This was the 80s, wasn't it? Was there anybody not doing cocaine? I would like it to be known if anybody if anybody in the 80s wasn't doing cocaine. I'm not terribly interested with knowing. Thank you. This is better. This is better. I think I like this. The weather outside is rather frightful, but in here, I think we have a little bit of a fighting chance. The style at the time. Now, you say that, but Sascha has reminded me that cocaine remained the style for a great many years, to the point where some of her favorite albums in the 2000s and 2010s seem to be almost entirely penned by cocaine rather than the body of the person writing them. Primarily those being, what was it? I believe 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge and Faces. Thank you for the canteen sip, Alaris. We appreciate it. I really don't know how Sascha does it. That Baja Blast does not go down easy. She's right. Coke is just one of those that gets in and around. I think the only reason it's fallen out of fashion is due to the opioid epidemic. That ever-present little skin cancer on the lower class as enforced by the upper class. Poorness is a thing that has to be enforced. We are all aware of this. Going to be on and off lurking because I'm working on a project and I'm terribly sorry that broke my focus. I need to draw 17 character F sheets. My drawing hand is going to be so buff. Do make sure you're taking breaks and stretching. If you'd like to know of any, Nyx can give you a couple of stretches for your arm and hand. And please, don't tell me that you don't need to do stretches. You will say that you wish you'll have done stretches in a few days if you don't. A little 80 fun fact. I had to say it's interesting, as for a while I had a person, I believe it was Ari, asking us how exactly our little nameplate of 080 is meant to be read out. I insisted that 080 is the formal way of reading it, but I described 80 as being a sort of informal way, and I described it as 80 is to 080 as Liz is to Elizabeth. And for some reason that had never really occurred or clicked to me in that way until I had said it. You learn new things every day, I suppose. It's difficult to put the universe into words is a statement that I think about a lot right now. I believe the first time this collective heard it was when it was ushered by the vocalist of a band we listened to a great many times called Low, a Minnesotan slowcore act primarily headed by a Mormon couple, that being Alan Sparhawk and Mimi Parker. We've been thinking quite a bit about poor Alan these days, and a not insignificant part of it, I can actually... This album, was it this year, or was it 2024? 2024 already is that far away, that's insane. When I first read it, I read it as 080. 080 is one way. 080, 80, 080, 080. I think the beauty of a number is that there's an interesting amount of fluidity to it. There's an interesting amount of fluidity to it. For those who are unaware, a rather big part of why Sascha suggested I name myself this is because 80 is the atomic number for Mercury, which she described as fluid, formless, shapeless, and dangerous, but also beautiful. It is completely reflective. It has no texture other than that which you proceed to project onto it. It has no form other than that which you contain it with. And yet, if you do attempt to contain it, it is particularly dangerous. I find this to be rather poetic and obviously fittingly prosy for someone like Sascha, but it is rather apt. And I would be lying if I said I didn't appreciate it to a degree. And not for nothing, but I think one of the most interesting ways about it is that when you give a collection of numbers, you can read it in a variety of different ways. Even just a simple 081 could be written as 081, 081, simply 81, or maybe 081. There are several different ways a combination of numbers can be read. 42, 42. These kinds of things. There are not that many differences in terms of how you can choose to read them, but there is more than one way to read a combination. There is, of course we went for 81. There is more than one way to read a combination of letters, or rather a combination of numbers. Sascha described it when first describing why she chose to pick 80 as the number for us, or the name for us rather, is because she said sometimes a number means more than a name. Because the number 80 refers to the atomic number of Mercury and thusly everything that Mercury represents, it also of course refers to the ways that Mercury can be used as a sort of adjective, with mercurial, a thing that tends to constantly change forms and shapes and understandings and feelings. Sometimes mercurial can be used derogatorily to describe a person who may, for example, have some form of a personality disorder if used by a particularly callous person in a derogatory fashion. I don't believe in that, but describing us as mercurial, as a thing that is constantly changing its shape and form and look, I would agree with this. I would agree with this, and thusly, a name only means what the name means, but a number has all manner of different possible things that it refers to, and I find it to be so much more freeing to go by a number than a name. 80, do you enjoy inconsequential hypothetical what would you do scenarios? Sascha has subjected me to a great many of these. I think Amber and Mira might be better for that. Angel Vice said, "Hi, that's me. I'm 081, and it'll never cease to entertain me." For those who are wondering what she's referring to, while 080 is the number that we chose, and it is also, ironically, primarily it was chosen because of the element of like the atomic number of the element of Mercury, which of course is the number that Sascha chose for her character's serial number as a monolith agent of Agent KS80, KS080, which was Sascha's serial number in canon, and she picked it because of the, ironically, a Texan nu metal band called Element 80, who named themselves after the atomic number for Mercury because, quote, "It is a heavy metal, but it isn't hard," which I like a fair bit. And so she chose to name her she chose to base her character's serial number around that for that exact reason, both as a reference and because the naming convention of the band seemed to be fairly apt for that reason. And when it came time to, I believe the original thing was when I first was starting to finally find ways to speak up in this body, Sascha's understanding of things came down to she didn't like referring to this body as Sascha, and originally 80 was just what she called the body, and whenever this body didn't feel like Sascha was in it, which I suppose was her understanding of the body kind of being vacant, if 80 was the name of the body and this body could be vacant, then whenever this body didn't feel like Sascha, it simply went by 80. Until she realized that I was not the body's vacant state. I was simply just another passenger. Sascha wants very badly to go for a Deftones reference, and I'm not letting her. Oh, see. It's good to see you, Ocean. How are you faring today? And as well as you, Amaryllis Thorn. Good to see you both, genuinely. I do hope you're both managing well. These times are taxing on all of us. Long time no see. It has been quite a bit since I've last had a discussion with Ocean. I believe I was asking in Sascha's stead if Ocean, Soroka, and Sascha would like to watch Sicario at some time. I'm not sure if Sicario is a movie for Ocean, though, I would have to say. As a forewarning, we're going to be getting an ad break in about 20 seconds. Terribly sorry for this, I assure you. I will fill time with something that is not going to be terribly missable, though Sasha's insisting that anything I say is important to listen to. I will choose to see that as flattering. During this ad break, I'm going to let the ambience simply play. I'm going to get up and put this Taco Bell back in the fridge. I can't eat anymore.
Настав час діяти. Долг знищить зону та кожного, хто стане на нашому шляху. Долучайся до долгу. Зараз ти як ніколи потрібен звичайним беззахисним громадянам за периметром. Захисти їх від зони.
У звільнення б.
Варта нам більше не допоможе, бійці. Ми самі по собі. Але ми доб'ємося свого. Це наш обов'язок. Виконай свій обов'язок. Стань плечем до плеча з однодумцями та покажи мутантам, на що ти готовий заради захисту людей.
У звільнення.
Нас занадто довго водили за носа та годували брехнею. Час заявити, що долг більше не відступить ні на крок від своєї мети. Долучайся до долгу. Зараз ти як ніколи потрібен звичайним беззахисним громадянам за периметром. Захисти їх від зони. Нас занадто довго водили за носа та годували брехнею. Час заявити, що долг більше не відступить ні на крок від своєї мети.
у звільнення б.
Варта нам більше не допоможе, бійці. Ми самі по собі. Але ми доб'ємося свого. Це наш обов'язок.
Ти взагалі пам'ятаєш життя без мутантів і аномалій?
Долучайся додому. Зараз ти як ніколи потрібен звичайним беззахисним громадянам за периметром. Захисти їх від зони.
Цікаво, що в ендічазі вивчають? Яка різниця? Не на тобі ж експерименти став.
Варта нам більше не допоможе, бійці. Ми самі по собі. Але ми доб'ємося свого. Це наш обов'язок.
Нас не попаде. Ось що травили. Іде банда на справу. А з кущів наш боєць кулаком грозить. Ватажок посилає одного свого розібратися. Той заходить у кущі і зникає. Ватажок посилає 3, 5, 10. Та сама історія. Чує там стрілянина, вибухи, крики. Вилітає на добитий шпанюк. От! Засада! Їх там 2.
Варта нам більше не допоможе, бійці. Ми самі по собі. Але ми доб'ємося свого. Це наш обов'язок.
Terribly sorry for the wait. We had to get up, store some of the food, use the restroom. The ad break is over. That's good enough for now.
Нам більше не допоможе, бійці. Ми самі
Sanguine Estelle, it's good to see you tonight. I have Chet Baker on in the background, so this is a nice atmosphere with the barrel grill. Sounds rather nice. I'm enjoying this a fair bit. It's certainly been an interesting kind of time. Right, I believe at an earlier point I was making reference to the band Low. And we've been listening to this band a fair bit. The union of Mimi Parker and Alan Sparhawk, a couple from Duluth, Minnesota, is an interesting little act that Sascha has had a fair amount of love for over the better part of the past decade. And not for nothing, but a fairly significant part of it comes from the companionship their music has offered her in very, very difficult times, which it continues to do. And I believe their album Double Negative was one of the first albums that we shared with our current partner, Nick Snightfall, over a stream, and it was delightful, I would say. But Sascha finds herself consistently thinking about that time she woke up that one November morning to Alan Sparhawk, effectively breaking the news to most of the band's following that his wife and the band's drummer, Mimi Parker, was no longer with us, opening up with the phrase, "It's hard to put the universe into words right now," which a lot of times when particularly grave things tend to happen, it's always rather hard to find the correct words, but sometimes it's equally difficult to find the correct words to say that you can't find the correct words. And I think it's difficult to put the universe into words. Does find itself getting a lot of use from this body just because it seemed to suffice in a time where a person almost seemed like saying nothing would be better than saying anything. And to that end, it still feels like it for us. There are many, many times where things happen, we don't really know how else to put it other than it's difficult to put the universe into words. And I think how we were feeling tonight, how we were feeling Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday night it's difficult to put the universe into words. It is. It's especially difficult now. And sometimes there are times where it's difficult to even find a way to stare at it. It's difficult to find a way to perceive it, to open your eyes and drink it in and not feel like it's kind of turning your stomach upside down. There are times where the universe feels like it's a thing you simply don't want to see, hear, think about, speak of, exist in. It's difficult to put into words. And I'll be perfectly honest. There was a point today where we weren't entirely sure if we could stream. I insisted to Sascha that streaming was going to be something she could do to soothe herself a fair bit. I believe that in a time she needs it, and in a time where a lot of our friends need it, going offline and spending time in a private VC recuperating or decompressing may not be as healing as one may think. And instead, the hate crew, or the community at large, could certainly use a space to sit down. We don't need to speak. We don't need to put the universe into words. We can simply sit beside each other and say, we're part of this universe, whether we accept it or not. It's better to be here, in it, and with each other, than out of it, and perfectly alone. So while it may be difficult to put the universe into words, and while it may be difficult to be in it, please know that we are happy that we are in it with you. Sascha called me corny for saying that, but I do think it's true. I do think that in times like these, where many of our friends are struggling greatly, where we are struggling greatly, when hearts bleed into oceans, those oceans flood, they run over, they form storm surges, and those storm surges lay waste to our towns that are our friendships, our families, our understandings of things. When our hearts bleed to such a degree, we need each other, don't we? And we certainly can't be opening ourselves much more than that. I got rice, I got meat. Anything else to put on these carnitas tacos? Some form of beans and sauce. Yes, I would believe some beans would be a good idea. A fair amount of possibly some salsa. Beans, salsa, guacamole. Maybe not guacamole, as it can be a little bit expensive and time-consuming to make. We've made it before. But some form of pinto or black beans. And some salsa. Perhaps pico de gallo. I can't chat because Handbrake is using 90% of my memory. Hello, Netta. It's good to see you. I believe Sascha is looking very, very much forward to a stream she'll be running with you on Thursday. Don't have beans. Beans are a texture issue. This is valid. Salsa you can do. I would absolutely advise some salsa. Pico de gallo is one that you can't go wrong with. We've used it ourselves, and of course used it on a variety of other things. I would also agree with Sanguine Estelle. If you do have any pico de gallo, I would advise putting some lime.
Пане командире, цілий день бігаю, навіть присісти часу не було. Командир, не було часу присісти. 50 присідань.
Настав час діяти. Долг знищить зону та кожного, хто стане на нашому шляху.
Поверні... Повернімося до розмови.
Lime on the carnitas as well is true. Pico is lovely and rather easy to make. Some spice, maybe some vegetables, absolutely. A perfect little combination you really can't go wrong with is some adobo. Nyx has been showing us how powerful adobo can be as a means of keeping things tasting fresh and interesting. It's a great little spice. Unfortunately, the pico de gallo we used for our own, for the, I believe it was, no, Nyx made a corn salsa. Lime is going to be part of the rice. I'm doing up some cilantro lime stuff. Wonderful. Cilantro lime rice is lovely. I'm a rather big fan of that. Street corn. No, absolutely. Nyx made us some, was it street corn salsa? We do always tend to make street tacos. Street taco style are very, very nice. Mexican and a great variety of Central and South American dishes are wonderful and very, very nice. Which is rather funny that I say that, as I've multiple times tonight explained that Taco Bell is not a thing I think I can stomach like Sascha does, but we simply have different tastes. It can often be rather surprising to people that two different headmates in the same body can have different food tastes, but we do. Sascha certainly tends to prefer her more savory things. Amber has the biggest sweet tooth in the world, and I'm still figuring myself out. Just wait till I get a store that lets me get back to my Thai cooking. We do need to find us an Asian market, primarily because Sascha is absolutely, I believe the word she used was, fiending for Bichatan charcoal. You know where one is now? Absolutely wonderful. I'm very excited for that. Primarily because I know Sascha won't stop speaking about it for many, many months afterwards, if we can find one and actually buy some proper charcoal from it. I believe she's still waiting on that table that Post bought us for our birthday. Then we need Bichatan charcoal, some charcoal briquettes, perhaps fire starters, but hopefully not. And then we need a chair, and we can get to grilling. Taco Bell isn't Mexican food, it's a bastardized version. No, this is true, but it is... No, well, naturally, if we want fast or faster food, and it happens to be a southwestern style, we do tend to prefer chains like Moe's. Certainly not Chipotle. I don't think it needs to be said, but if any of you were considering buying Chipotle at any point, I would have to ask that you do not. Tex-Mex is its own style of cooking. It certainly is. I would argue this. I need to also hit an Asian grocery store. We have an H-Mart up in Nanaimo, not far from us, but I wish we had something more local. Now, I've heard you consistently talk about Nanaimo, and I believe Nanaimo bars was a thing you referred to at one point. This is a rather breathtaking little vista, isn't it? Nanaimo bars are a Canadian dessert. They're so tasty. That is wonderful to hear. Learning about regional foods has been a thing that Sascha has always been interested in. It's a thing she loves, and I believe one of the things she was most excited to do with Nyx and still does want to get into doing, and hopefully can do with Kelly once she arrives here to spend time with us in the better part of a week from now, is that Sascha is very interested. Sasha's fairly interested in learning how to make traditional komi dishes, from like bread dishes to certain forms of meat. Naturally, a rather specific a rather specific regional meat, which I believe is either reindeer or something else. There's like a type of animal meat that tends to be used fairly often in komi cooking and traditional komi dishes that is naturally going to be fairly hard to get a hold of here in the States, and thusly we will have to find some form of substitute. I do like that if you wait in here. I do appreciate that the nightmare stops for just a moment if you wait in the bathroom. Sascha said she doesn't think she could shit with this going on. That's interesting. Netta said back when I didn't know shit about shit, I had a bad experience with Chipotle where the food tasted like they didn't fully get the cleaner off the grill. So I wouldn't have gone back there anyway. So, as a person, or rather, I think would be better to say, as a presence inhabiting a body that worked at Chipotle, we, at the very least, we don't have any memory of a grill cleaner being used, but what they did give us was they gave us, I believe, these little black cubes that were almost like a sort of like pumice or charcoal or some other form of like porous kind of stone. They would give you this little block of porous stone, and you would just keep kind of just grinding it on the stovetop, on the flat top grill, until you basically scraped all of the impurities off of it. Then wash it with water and a rag, and it was good. So, if they were using any stovetop cleaners, it would definitely have been happening after we had last worked at one. I don't think in all of my years of being in his body and fronting, I have any memories of actually working at it that weren't just relayed to me by Sascha. If you've got a decent-sized city nearby, you can find a specialty butcher. This is true. We do have a fairly reliable butcher shop near us on our main street. Perhaps we can find some caribou there. It tasted like chemicals. This depends. What year was it, Netta? Angel says, I do live close enough to caribou country where I could, once I get a rifle, so long as the butcher will cut it up, I'll be happy. It is very entertaining to envision Angel driving to her local butcher shop with a dead caribou in the back of her truck and just slamming it on the cashier's desk the same way Al Jurgensen dropped a dead deer's head on the desk of his record label's executive saying, here's your new fucking album cover. You worked at Chipotle. Can I intercept their deliveries of queso and cheese? Sascha would like to inform you that you do not want their queso and cheese. You want Moe's queso and cheese instead, and if you think you don't, you are wrong. 1419. This is a year after we had ceased working at them. You... Because from what we can tell, when we were working at Chipotle, Chipotle doesn't clean their grills until the evening. Chipotle cleans their grills in the evening. They clean them at close. So once the entire day is done, then they close up the whole building, and then they, you know, give you your little brick and you clean off the grill with it. So it couldn't have been that, because they don't clean grills until the evening while they're closing. And again, they only use like a sort of like porous stone brick for cleaning rather than any form of like liquid chemicals. It is likely you might have been tasting something else. You might have been tasting something else. And it also was kind of difficult for it to be anything else, as the fajita vegetables were always cooked on a separate portion of the grill. That part was always notoriously difficult to clean, according to Sascha. We really don't know. We really don't know what that could have been. If you've only been there once, I really do hesitate to say. It seems almost a little bit out of character for me to be this dismissive, and I suppose the word would be complacent, but I imagine you might have just been tasting what Chipotle tastes like, to which I would have to say, I'm sorry you tasted Chipotle. I enjoy cilantro. The cilantro soap gene is interesting, and I can confirm we definitely don't have it, because I believe it would make eating salsa nigh impossible for us. Alright.
Виконай свій обов'язок. Стань плечем до плеча з однодумцями та покажи мутантам
You'd be devastated if we did.
заради захисту людей.
We certainly don't. We certainly don't. And I'm sure you're wondering, 80, how can you tell for sure? And trust me, well, Sascha at this point knows better than to tell me that I'm not actually several centuries old, if not older than mankind itself. I certainly feel like that. I would argue that while I don't purport to know everything, I certainly do have memories in this body of Sascha tasting soap, and I can tell you it did not taste like like cilantro did. Ocean says Netta spotted. Angel said, I do love the idea of cooking meat I harvested or farmed myself. Maybe it's because I farmed for so much of my life. There is a degree of joy and sort of love to that you can't get from just buying meat anywhere, much less at a grocery store than a specialty butcher shop. It's kind of like how one of Sasha's greater, I believe, aspirations was when it came to cooking, was to make a lasagna entirely from scratch, which included the noodles, which at a time were possible to do from scratch, as she had a access to a pasta press which could be used to make lasagna noodles, as well as an immersion blender, and our mother tended to grow a lot of tomatoes out in the backyard. So between tomatoes and the ability to make pasta, the only thing she wasn't entirely certain on being able to do from scratch would be cheese. Cheese is quite its own little situation, especially when making a lasagna requires multiple different forms of it, from Parmesan to ricotta. We really should ask our landlord if they plan to be replanting those habanero plants in our backyard soon. It was always nice to come home to those. Thor, it is good to see you tonight. This is a cool area to explore. Tonight, we won't be doing a great much exploring. As Sascha is currently recuperating from a rather difficult day, hello, I'm 80, I'm one of her headmates. I like to refer to myself as the oldest soul. I feel like I've been here the longest, even though my presence in this body is quite not nearly as long as Sascha or Amber. Due to Sascha requiring some recuperation time after a rather particularly stressful day, I am taking over and ensuring that all of our friends who have been having equally stressful times and days are able to sit down with us and find a way to warm themselves from the cold around us. Things are very, very cold. And not just for those in the polar vortex, but not just those in the polar vortex, but for those living, period, I would argue. So, if the most we can do right now, because I have been insisting to Sascha that she is trying a little bit too hard to take on the burdens and the weight and the hurt of others, she has always been the type to insist on put your weight on my shoulders and trying to make herself a symbol of hope and strength by the way of holding up everyone else's anguish. And unfortunately, it has not had a terribly good effect on her in terms of her overall mental as of late. And as a result, she has realized, or at least I'm attempting to get her to realize, that she cannot make a difference if she is burning herself out trying to make a difference. So, instead, we are hoping that we can make a difference tonight by offering this little space where you can sit beside us at a campfire and we can talk. It'll be a Stalker Tuesday where nothing happens, which I suppose is not too dissimilar from most Stalker Tuesdays, but I'm sure you understand. This is what Sascha described as the best smoke spot in the zone. Interesting wordplay on that one. I simply find it to be a nice place we can gather. Since a blowout has just happened, we shouldn't have to worry about one for a while. Netta said, watching you play Stalker reminds me I really want to get a gas mask. Send us a message and Sascha will show you her 2 gas masks she owns. She actually owns a Finnish military gas mask, which she bought around 2012, which is surprisingly apt given that we learned in 2025 that our ancestry on our mother's side is Komi, meaning that as per Permian lineage, there is at least a little bit more Finnish in us than pure Russian, as our mother was Finnish and our father was Bulgarian. We also have a Czechoslovakian Bulldog M10M, which Sascha primarily purchased because she saw it used by drummer John Domayan in System of a Down's music video for Sugar in, I believe, 1997? But Sascha does own 2 gas masks. Make sure not to use period appropriate. Estelle, you are primarily referring to Soviet GP5s. Soviet GP5s are have particularly bad asbestos because they are built like that. So if you are planning on getting it, we made sure to tell Netta not to use GP5s. So, if any of you in chat happen to be questioning or thinking, make sure that if you are going to get into gas mask collecting, which at this point is far cheaper than, say, retro games, I would advise not using period-accurate Soviet GP5s. Very nice. There exist conversion kits from GP5 masks to NATO filters. We'll manage. We will manage. The Bulldog M10M that we purchased actually came in a rather nice little military bag, complete with extra filters, and even testing a gas mask for radiation is not a bad idea either. This is true. I would argue this is very true, especially when purchasing military surplus. Especially purchasing military surplus from Eastern Europe. Soviet gear in general is interesting. I say that knowing the contents of the AI-2 medkits and what goes into the bayonets. Now, in a perfect world, it would be enough to point out that technically, bringing something that is irradiated out of an irradiated zone and attempting to sell it and mail it to a person is hideously illegal in most places in the world. But of course, that is not taking into account the absolute... How can I put this? How can I put this? That is not taking into account the absolutely embarrassing degree of complacency and negligence in most world governments when it comes to regulating the things that are sent through mail. So in a perfect world, you should not have to test brand new, mint condition surplus you buy off eBay. But I had to check M10 because I was scared of COVID back in the day. The cheek filters are an absolute nightmare to try to fit in. This is correct. We can also attest that when COVID was beginning to really hit, we did start eyeing up that M10 quite a bit back in the day. Sascha took a rather funny photograph of placing her M10 over her combat boots and gloves with a 5-panel hat above it to look like a tiny little guy in the corner of her room. It was rather cute. We should post it again. We will post it again. I don't know what we expected when we searched this. This is quite a beautiful little spot, though. As soon as we first discovered it during our last couple of runs of this game, we've never really been able to pry our eyes from this little location. It's probably one of the most beautiful points you can get to in the game, given the fact that you can see as far as you can and from so high up. I really want a code vein purifier mask for cosplay and photo purposes, but if I could make a version of one that is a functional respirator, that would be awesome. I would agree with Angel. This is unfortunate. We're having trouble finding pictures of what Sascha simply describes as the guy. I have a 3M respirator I use for working with spray painter in the off chance there's tons of smoke happening in my old apartment. Probably the best spot you can get into without mods. We would like to find access to a camera unlocking mod that allows for some form of photo mode. Sascha plans to make use of that to find a background reference for scenery of the Duga array. For purposes she will elucidate at a later point, or you might find out once her plans with this have been fully realized. I have an M40 gas mask. I can't wear it. We considered purchasing an M40, but for some reason it was rather difficult for us to get our hands on one. Nobody seemed to be selling one at the time. But this is a very pretty spot. We hope we can find a camera mod. FTOR, if you know of any photo mode or camera unlocking mods that you would personally vouch for, do feel free to link them to us in a whisper. We would very, very much appreciate that. If you want mine, I'd be willing to discuss getting it to you. Were it an earlier time where we had plans to use these for anything, we might have. At this point, maybe not. We're finding now that moving out and having to be a little bit lighter on your feet means that buying things simply to have them is having much, much less of an appeal. Which isn't to say a definitive no, but if it will be a yes, it won't be for a while. But yes, Netta, if you're still here, do send us a message. Still on vanilla after 650 hours. This is true, we are over 200 and still playing on vanilla. We have a great many friends who insist on modding the game, and we still do not want to mod it. We will keep it as is, and we will be happy. The ambient soundscapes of Stalker are so interesting. How have you been, though, Fdor? How has life been treating you? I forget this province likes to set itself on fire every summer. Might need to get some kind of filter mask again. That might be a good idea. I do remember there was a time that fires were really beginning to pop off in 2023, and... oh, Christ, I'm starting to incorporate some of Sascha's lexicon. Fires were really beginning to pop off in 2023 to the point where we had the better part of almost an entire week where the smoke made it nigh impossible to exist in New York State. The way that it looked when she walked outside during one of these, the way the whole sky was orange and almost felt like the world was ending was absolutely surreal. The way that Stalker 2 looks during blowouts was not too dissimilar visually. It was certainly something. There was also that time about just under a full year ago where we were driving to work and a wildfire began happening about, I'd want to say, 15 minutes from our house. It was a wildfire that began happening around midday, and Sascha saw it from the distance and wasn't entirely sure what it was until she got closer and saw what the smoke was coming from. She drove on a highway overpass. She drove on an overpass over a highway where the wildfire was happening on the highway bank underneath the overpass. So the wind was blowing the plume of smoke that was billowing up from the fire so that the smoke was just billowing up through the overpass, and she drove directly through it. I'm rather impressed that she did that. She said she couldn't see more than a foot in front of her car during that, and it was a miracle nobody hit her. But she ended up having to find another way to get home after work because that entire road was blocked off due to the relief efforts. And thankfully, first responders were able to quell it rather quickly, but it did give her an awful scare. Wildfire smoke was not fun. We do remember during that time of 2023, we had a window, not like, we couldn't exactly afford an AC unit in our window, especially given that our house has central AC already, which our mother was fairly stringent about, which we now realize is probably for the best. But we did have this interesting little unit where you'd put it into your window, and it would simply blow air in, but only if the temperature was colder than inside of the room. So if a room got too hot and the temperature outside was cooler, and if the temperature outside was below a certain dew point of humidity. So rather than a normal window fan that simply blows hot, humid air into the room. This was a fan that was designed to filter air and only bring it in if it met a certain condition that wouldn't heat or humidify your room. Which was nice, but the main problem was these were not built to last, and for $250 a pop, they did not need to be lasting less than about 5 months. They consistently broke and had all kinds of system errors that had absolutely zero hope of ever being fixed. But we do remember that during the summer of 2023, I believe we actually had to take a break when the smoke was happening because of how difficult it made it to exist. But we do remember actually taking... We do remember taking the filter, the HEPA 2 filter, out of the fan's, like, little plate and looking at it, and it was almost completely black following the wildfire smoke that came through in 2023. It was something else entirely. Our in-room fan filter that we've had since around 2020 certainly didn't fare much better either. I suppose it was best that this happened after COVID, so enough people had masks on hand anyway, but it was quite something to drive in. Thankfully, it didn't last terribly long, but it was rather apocalyptic to have to witness. Dour just said, recently completed the achievements, discovered a couple of bugs, reported to GSC. I hope they fix all that. I do too. We have noticed GSC have been very, very good at keeping up to date on things. We appreciate that. I looked into filters so as to maybe put it around me whilst I have a cigar. Might be worth looking into again, even though I generally smoke outdoors. Not a terrible idea. Not a terrible idea. I would advise putting loose coffee beans, like whole coffee beans, into little loose jars around your room. We've been using it as a makeshift air freshener method that doesn't rely on things like Febreze or any other chemicals, and just makes our room smell like coffee, which of course our partner, who already works at a coffee shop, doesn't mind one bit. Sascha remembers one partner who was particularly unfond of the smell of coffee, and we personally can't understand that one bit. It's strange to say. Generally speaking, whenever we're streaming, Sascha, of course, is quite rowdy, quite loud, rambunctious, having the time of her life naturally as she does anytime she's around everybody, but tonight, for the first time in a very long time, we feel at peace here. We're sitting here in the comfort of some friends, talking about whatever seems to visit us. Sascha is resting. The souls of this body are in harmony, and all together we are sitting here and enjoying this view. There's a few places that need to stink better in this joint, even though it thoroughly smells of me and Missy now. I see. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. I'm sure Sascha would. The central AC filters usually have to be replaced every 3 months or even faster. For an external fan, it would probably be in weeks. This is true, even if the external fan does not tend to be running that often. But it feels nice. Amber and Mira are simply resting together. Sasha's between all of us. A few spots in this house have a weird smell. Gotta get my scented candles back burning again. I understand. What we may do is we may relight a candle that Nyx got us right when she moved in and we went out shopping for things to make this house feel more like a home. We got a little candle that is made to mainly smell like a type of, like a form of burning wood a slightly scented burning wood, but burning wood, complete with burning wick, like wood wicks, that actually crackle when you burn them, giving this room a proper campfire, atmosphere when they're lit. It's nice. It's nice. I think I will see if there is another location we can spend some time in. It really is a shame. There are a great many little locations that we're very fond of in the zone, and yet, after a certain point in different story settings, it becomes increasingly difficult to find some that feel like they are still cozy enough. I think one of the greatest tragedies of Zalesia falling like it did is that it doesn't have that same homely atmosphere it did when you first begin the game. Now it's empty, desolate, cold. There's not a lot of memories there that don't hurt a little bit. Should look up to see if there's burning mesquite wood scented candle. That does sound very, very nice. For a while, Sascha, when us and Nyx were vacationing together for a week in March of 2025, Sascha had her aspirations to find cigarette-scented, what's the word? Incense. Her searches proved fruitless, but not for lack of trying. That little jump off the side of the cooling tower is always breathtaking. I always feel our breath catching in our lungs whenever we take that jump. Incense we really should get to using more often, I think. Given that we are autistic and our body is extremely sensitive to smell, I think incense as a means of keeping the smells around us both constantly changing and appealing would be nice. Smoky wood, cloves, citrus, tobacco, and marshmallow. Estelle, would you do us a favor and send that to us, please? I'm gonna go looking for some tomorrow, and maybe something for my damnable lighter. That Zippo has the hardest time. That's fair. We still have our Zippo lighter that came with the Black Lagoon Premium Edition, and Sascha loves to stim with it. We did actually get some lighter fluid for it at one point, and of course, given that we don't smoke, there wasn't really a whole lot to do with it. I want to start using incense. It's something my nana used a lot, and a few close friends as well, so it's a nostalgic smell. The zone is a dangerous and hostile place. It's natural to feel that way. This is true, but Sascha and I have always felt like a fairly important part of Stalker's atmosphere is the sort of human camaraderie that helps make the zone feel a little bit more surmountable in its horror. The fact that even in all of these horrific places where things rarely ever feel like they are okay, there are these small little condensed pockets where even for just a moment they are. I don't think you can go into these. Thank you kindly, Estelle. I have to say it's interesting. Sascha feels weirdly nostalgic tonight, running a stream of a Stalker title without any camera or tracking or even on-screen overlay. It is just the game. Which, even when we joined VTuber circles in 2022, as a means of finding shelter from a great many existential threats that were assailing us over the course of that year. Even when we spent our time in VTuber circles early on, Sascha was very adamant she didn't want to be a VTuber, or have an overlay that she felt like it would detract from the game. Instead, she opted to simply have her stream as it was, where it was simply the game and a side chat. A relatively sparing overlay, but she liked to keep it very sparing and tasteful. And somewhere down the line that changed, and she realized that VTubing and getting to be a character and have an art style all your own to how you present things was something that really changed streaming into feeling like not just something she had fun doing, but something she could love, something she could take pride in. And yet, even while streaming and having her overlay and all of these complex assets to everything that we do, helps her feel most euphoric in this body, helps her feel like this vessel, and the way that her soul interacts with it can be most in tune with each other is through doing that. There are still these moments like now where we'll sit here just playing a game with nothing but, you know, the screen, and that's it, and we feel surprisingly at peace. We've been getting a few fair tastes of it as Amber has been streaming in our Discord server, which we are considering telling Amber to start calling these little streams jamborees, at the behest of Sascha. And those also have a fairly simplistic presentation of a simple game being presented in 640 by 480, complete with just a PNG. Thank you for the canteen sip, Ari. This is actually very necessary, as we forgot to do vocal warm-ups before stream.
Здається, що це було давно і неправда.
Виконай свій обов'язок. Стань плечем до плеча з однодумцями та покажи мутантам, на що ти готовий заради захисту людей.
This has been nice. Whereas most Stalker titles, or most Stalker streams, tend to be rather engaging, they tend to be fairly involved, as there is always much to do, Stalker as a game can be rather stressful to play. Instead, we find ourselves oddly at peace here. Simply just enjoying the scenery, enjoying how things are. It's rather nice.
Зараз ти як ніколи потрібен звичайним беззахисним громадянам за периметром. Захисти їх від зони.
We would like to leave this location. We're not terribly fond of duty. I do associate Amber with older consoles like the PS2, and there is a reason for that. By the way, we have an ad starting in 1 minute and 30, so I suppose if you're here for the in-depth discussion. How about this? I will run an ad break while I move us to another location. So we will withhold discussion until we get there. In 3, 2, 1. And so we have an ad. But what would a good location be to relax in? Because I don't want to go to the Brood. The flea market and the depot is a fairly solid choice. Is this game worth now? I really want to try it. We may not be the best collective to ask this, Tony. Partially because we have been playing it since launch. We were actually gifted a pre-order of it by a very good friend of ours, and we've been playing it since launch, and Sascha is especially adamant that this game has always been worth being played. Sascha is adamant that even when this game was especially flagrantly buggy and poorly optimized, Sascha is adamant that that makes it effectively the most faithful a Stalker sequel could be. I will not speak for her, but if you are asking us if it is worth it now, I will simply state that many of us feel that the game has always been worth it. I can't say either way. I am not the soul in this body with the most horses in this race. That would be Sascha, but she will tell you any day that this game is worth playing and has been worth playing. So I will, on her behalf, say yes. Pork is almost done, thank Christ. Sounds wonderful. Sounds absolutely wonderful. That is the only issue, though, is the PS5. We have never played Stalker on consoles, and we're not particularly interested in ever doing so. Stalker on a console just feels... To us, it feels a little bit weird. Thank you for the words. I'm going to jump into the zone. Sounds lovely. We hope you enjoy your time. We've been playing this game since launch, so if you do have questions, do feel free to let us know. It certainly is an amazing game, but it is also, of course, when we say it is a very faithful and fantastically done Stalker sequel, that is because it is a perfect Stalker sequel, warts and all, which means there is going to be some bad optimization. I would agree. The fact that this game was in development for this long, a little jank never hurt anyone. Very, very agreeable. The fact that this game was in development for this long, looks as dazzling as it does, and is as optimized as it is, especially compared to titles like Monster Hunter Wilds. And on top of that, is as engrossing in terms of atmosphere, gameplay, and story. Sascha will tell you any day that this is the first Stalker game to actually make her legitimately invested in its storyline, to the point where the better part of a month or two ago, when getting to a major plot point that she's experienced a good few times before, she spent the better part of 2 hours describing its implications and what it means, and all of like, she spent the better part of 2 hours describing its implications and what it means for the future of the game's story, and how dark it was and how much it hurt to witness it, and how much she had her hands on her head saying, "Oh my God, no." The stream where the game enters its second act was a stream that we'll think about forever, because it was a stream where we were so insanely invested in. Sascha was absolutely just talking for hours and hours and hours about how much that part of the story means and says to her. It was the first Stalker game to actually, like, invest her in the story, because otherwise she was playing Stalker entirely for the gameplay. Sanguine Estelle said that was one of my favorite streams. We're happy you feel that way. I certainly agree. This exact spot is a political message from the devs. This is interesting, because I know this spot is the flea market from Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl and Clear Sky, which is in the garbage. And in Shadow of Chernobyl, if memory serves, I don't think it has a whole lot in it. There's not much in this location, except over there I believe there's a guy who tries to rob you by pretending to be dying. Down here in Stalker Clear Sky, you get attacked by bandits who use a booby trap to knock you out and take all of your things, which of course you can avoid by dropping all of your things beforehand, and then picking them back up after you wake up. I will be sure to forward those compliments to Sascha Estelle. Atmosphere in games is something that is easy to overlook. It is easy to overlook. And yet, even so, it is something I think people need to take into account the most, because in order for your game to truly be compelling, it has to still be compelling when nothing is happening. And while discussing the arts is more something that Amber and Sascha do, I will argue I think they have a fairly good head on their shoulders when it comes to that. And I do think that it's hard to enjoy art if, especially games, if there is a lacking amount of effort put into just the atmosphere of it all. Now, I did say I was going to do this, so we can do this here. But, Estelle, you talked about how Amber reminds you of PS2 titles. And I would agree. And I would agree partially because we have been having our suspicions for a while that Amber is the original in this body. That Sascha is not the first. That Sascha is not the first, and Amber may be the first. Or Amber may have been the first. And our reasoning for this comes down to the fact that Amber acts the youngest, implying that her personality is a snapshot of possibly one of the earliest points in our life, meaning that she was created right when we were youngest and stayed that way after Sascha came in to effectively take over when we hit a certain age where we were kind of forced by our environment and our situations to effectively pretend to be tougher than we were as a survival tactic. And after that point, the earliest and first among us, Amber, had to sort of step out and allow our more rugged and kind of rowdy persona of Sascha to take over. Looking back at footage of this body speaking at its earliest ages seems much more in common with Amber's talking patterns than Sascha. And it makes sense. It would make sense that Amber was the first, meaning that given that much of Amber's personality is based around nostalgia for the early 2000s and the late 90s, it would make sense then that Amber is the one that seems to enjoy a lot of Y2K things much more than Sascha, because Amber is quite literally a snapshot of us right before we aged beyond that point. Ari says I actually relate to that. It's interesting, we did not give a whole lot of thought to Amber's origins, and at one point I described her to Sascha as simply being the, like the personification of mirth, or just simply happiness, in its purest form, and given to us and just existing alongside us. But it would make more sense to assume that rather than me, while I feel like the oldest in this body, I feel consistently like I've been here for generations upon generations. I feel like I have seen entire civilizations like rise and fall. That is how I tend to view things. I am definitely not the first in this body, because I remember Sascha being here before me, as I didn't begin to appear until 2012. And Sascha was not the first either, and she finds it very likely that Amber was here before us, and Sascha had to take over to protect Amber's heart around probably sometime between 5 and 10. We can't remember exactly. A sickle and a hammer was the state emblem of the USR. Yes, I do remember that one little statuette outside the front of the flea market is now destroyed. You can see the actual hammer on the ground that was used to destroy it, which we like. We were aware of the fact that Russian speaking factions in the original Stalker titles were a sort of cultural in-joke, poking fun at the idea of militarism and comparing it to the Soviet mindset in a way, which is one of the reasons why we find Stalker very interesting, and it should be played in its native language rather than with any kind of English dub. Thank you for the canteen sip, by the way, Melissa. I will do just that. I also realized we forgot to take our medication for the evening. That's unfortunate. I think we have the energy for another half hour. It's going to be a fairly shorter one tonight, since our energy is still fairly low. It was better to stream than not stream, and if we were to stream, it would be shorter and a little bit less involved. But there's that. I much prefer Stalker in the original language, says Gibora. It makes the game so much more immersive, especially HOC Heart of Chernobyl, because the accents of the English VAs throw me out of the world. Absolutely, absolutely. I attempted to play it in English, and I couldn't really enjoy it. I do have to say, me and Sascha are very fond of the way that the Shadow of Chernobyl English version had this unique hybrid where dialogue trees and story and quest important dialogue, dialogue trees and actual contextual dialogue trees, and dialogue relating to quests was all in English, but combat barks, campfire chatter, and most idle unscripted idle NPC chatter was all in Russian and Ukrainian, which made the world feel surprisingly diverse and varied in its vibe, where it felt like you could understand the things that you were supposed to pay attention to, and you understood them because you were paying attention. And as soon as things were happening in your background or around you, they kind of ceased being English and instead were just, you didn't need to understand Ukrainian to know what was being said. It's very difficult to find a language where a person announcing that they're going to throw a grenade is not very easily noted as throwing a grenade. I don't think I've ever heard a person throw a grenade in a foreign language and me not be able to understand without a translator that this person was throwing a grenade. But the way that Shadow of Chernobyl had it, where if you played on English, you were hearing English only in the parts where you were supposed to be focusing, and outside of it, all dialogue just went back to being its native language, like it was just in the background and you no longer had to worry about it. And without knowing what exactly the words were, you could understand what they were saying just based on the context of it. You could understand a person was probably telling a joke because of the tone of his voice, or if a person was throwing a grenade, or what else. The English accents in Shadow of Chernobyl were more in line with the setting, but the translation was far from ideal. This is fair, but enough mods existed to fix the translation that at that point I consider it to be moot. I've learned a bit of Ukrainian from this game and from my friend Ari. That is wonderful. I'm working on turning an Airsoft VSS into the Veteran. Picked it up 2 weeks ago and managed to get my hands on a 3D model of the Geiger counter in the stock. This is our first... I'm sorry, hold on. Excuse me. Will you give me a moment? It's always when we're having a good anecdote, too. That was surprisingly tense. That was surprisingly tense. Angel said, I think in lore, while in the zone, Angel would just use the clusterfuck. Well, because the clusterfuck is quite literally just your character's stray dog rifle. Unfortunately, the closest we have to Missy is the SOP mod. And the SOP mod 416 in this game, which, credit to it, is a nice rifle. But it is still a fully automatic 416 that suffers from the 416's drastic damage fall off. The voices and accents in Shadow of Chernobyl are also faction-based, so you do not need to have direct visual. This is another thing that Sascha was very, very proud of, or very happy with about Shadow of Chernobyl, was that all of the combat barks in it and Call of Pripyat all have different voices and accents depending on the faction. So without visual contact, and even without knowing the language, it doesn't take fairly long to understand exactly who is speaking. The Monolithians tend to speak with such a stoic, sort of exaggerated drawl that it makes me sound like Yahtzee. And naturally, the dutiers and mercenaries have this much more gruff and aggressive voice. The freedomers sound a little bit more relaxed and kind of high spirits. Everybody, and of course you've got the Gopniks. Everybody speaks with their own sort of mannerisms and their own sort of ways they talk, and it's genuinely kind of astounding that Shadow of Chernobyl manages to make different factions and characters all sound beautifully distinct, even outside of the language barrier and all else. We have long since been a proponent that after having spent a life playing a great many different open world video games, Stalker continues to be the one we like the most, primarily because it feels just the most real. Sounds like Sasha's coming out a bit talking about Stalker. She is practically trying to push me out of my spot in the center of the couch, saying, "Come on, let me talk, let me talk." And I'm saying, Sascha, you gave me a stream and I'm going to finish it, and you are going to sit there. And if you have input, I will say it for you. But she is attempting to barrel rush me out of the way like she did when Amber woke up on Christmas and we discovered Suicide Boys had dropped a brand new album, and Sascha proceeded to tackle her out of the way to listen to it. She's currently attempting to bum rush the microphone. But we have always been a rather big proponent that after a lengthy life having been spent playing a great many open world video games, Stalker is the one that consistently has been the most engrossing, primarily because of what its NPC idle chatter sounds like, rather than, say, it's rather heavily memed to this point where it's not really worth acknowledging that Elder Scrolls games, idle chatter and background chatter, is fairly wooden, I believe the word would be. It's wooden, it's stilted, it does not feel like it flows. But in Stalker, if you walk into any kind of watering hole or anything like that, and you hear an NPC talk, you hear them tell jokes, you hear them say things, it feels so genuine. It feels astonishingly genuine to hear characters in this game talk and tell jokes and give combat barks that feel fittingly dire. Stalker's ambient and idle chatter feels very, very real and engaging. And I think that goes a long way towards making the game feel the most enjoyable to play. For that reason, I would argue. But I won't. Meanwhile, my Stalker OC would be a gun hoarder. A chest full of ammo and guns that he never uses, but those 15 RPM 74s will come in handy one day. The tried and true, but I might need it later approach. I don't think I have heard the same conversations between two NPCs in my playthrough. Meanwhile, I will hear the same dialogue from 12 different Skyrim guards in the span of an hour. These are our thoughts exactly. These are our thoughts exactly. Was trying to learn some Stalker music for my new guitar, but I'm a little nervous about tuning it to C# standard since it's a nylon string. This is fair. Sascha is fairly proud of having based her persona around her Stalker OC, of being a a combat maid, even though, of course, the life and experiences of this character tend to still be fairly simple or rather the life and experiences of this character have changed just a little bit to now reflect a myriad of different influences and concepts that now simply approach more Yuri than anything else. Holy Hitbox, welcome on in. Are you playing this with any mods or just normal? This is entirely vanilla. The only modification we've ever installed was, I believe it was an optimization mod. I believe it was called Ultra Plus. Yes, Stella, there is Yuri. As Emot explained, he has Sasha's AO3. He simply hasn't read some of the stories yet. Reki certainly has, though. Stalker 2 is a personal stash cloud base for casual players. And yes. Dour, I think Kibora was more referring to a Stalker OC rather than their actual experience in game. I will say, given that the original Shadow of Chernobyl had like maybe 1 or 2 hub areas that you were expected to live out of for almost the entire game, and Call of Pripyat had about 3 hubs, only 2 of them you spent most of the game in. Then it was much easier to keep yourself light-footed enough and be able to move things when you needed it. I do believe it was a godsend that they made the stashes function on a Resident Evil item box system, because genuinely speaking, one of the first things that made our hearts sink when we first started playing this game was getting all of these things, and then that realization that we would have to lug all of it to another faction hub. And when we realized we wouldn't have to do that, we were fairly ecstatic and happy. Every time I throw a bolt in this game, I'm imagining the Eminem throwing meme. There is something about the throwing animation that lends itself to that, doesn't it? Friend, if you would like to know more about the Yuri, you can message Sascha and she will tell you about the Yuri. The Yuri is meant to be more a part of the on-stream environment, but that is still on hold, while stream assets are being put together. A good metal clonk for a bolt contacting my head. I believe the Team Fortress 2 metal pan impact would do you well here. Question. Where are you? The veteran. Gaze and despair at the veteran with the stendo. Sascha just started laughing like she has never laughed before, by the way, at me saying that. She said that me saying the phrase stendo felt incredibly jarring. So this is somehow the first time we're realizing that there is actually a Geiger counter in the stock of the veteran. This is true, Angel. She has had to chase you out of the bar with a frying pan before. So it's actually very nice that these models have unique world models, but you're right. It actually does have a Geiger counter just lodged into the stock. We've been playing this game for the better part of over a year now, and we're still kind of shocked to be learning that. Anyway, the VSS Venturez veteran with the stendo was so ready for the lightning to interrupt again. Sounds like a lot of hoopla. Well, curious little toy. Don't know if I'll be making much use of it. The Dnipro has been serving us fairly well. I see no reason to put it down for now. It would have been rather funny if the lightning did interrupt. I'd like to get a little bit heartfelt during this storm, while we wind down for the night. So, if I may, I'd like to say this. If there is one major plot detail you can get only via looking at one gun with a scoped rifle, I am very excited to discover that. I only make use of the VSS Vintar because VSS, I love my integrally suppressed 3 washers 9x39 rifle. The VSS Vintar does prove to be... I think it is the flagship gun of Stalker. It is featured almost in every game's box art and carried by almost every character. And almost every game allows you to get one fairly early on for its own little prices, and I think that's beautiful. But I wanted to get a little bit heartfelt here. As my energy is beginning to wane, Sascha needs to turn in soon, and we would like to raid out and call it a night after this interestingly minimalist little Stalker Tuesday. But we wanted to make this clear. The past 96 hours have been impossibly turbulent, as we said at the outset of the stream, and it took a lot to be able to convince Sascha that canceling stream was not the right call to make. Part of it came down to the fact that in a time of turbulence when a lot of people in the hate crew are currently struggling very, very badly between fears of losing loved ones, the grief of losing loved ones, between a whole slew of different things that have us in the grip of anxiety, of exhaustion, of burnout, and of emotional distress. It would have been very easy for us to cancel stream and to say, no, I don't have the energy to do this. We can't do this right now. And instead, I told Sascha, we need community. We need to get up there. We need to talk about things. We certainly didn't talk about things to a granular degree because it is not a point where that is a good idea. A lot of these things that our dearest friends have been struggling with are deeply private and should not be aired out. But their hurt and their pain cannot simply just be put away when it is time to go live. It is a very difficult situation when you hurt and you cannot discuss why you hurt, but you can't just put your hurt away when it's time to stream. These things cannot be discussed publicly, but we should at least try and alleviate the hurt. And that is the purpose of tonight, was to alleviate the hurt, to sit down with each other around these campfires, up on the tops of these buildings, and talk. Less gameplay, less yapping, less chaos, and more we talk. When I made that stream live tweet, I meant every word of it. I wanted people to sit with me by the campfire while Sascha rests, and it's been truly wonderful getting to sit with all of you here. Because at the end of the day, it would have been easy to cancel stream. It would have been easy to say that we are dealing with too much and we cannot do it. But at a time like this, we need each other. We need camaraderie. We need community. We need love. We need to all sit by the campfire with each other. And so, I have brought you here. Few things are more healing than sitting next to somebody who needs you. Few things are more powerful than going up to somebody who it feels like the very universe itself wants to pry you away from, and saying, I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad we are still together. And as I said about an hour ago, it is hard to put the universe into words. But even while it may be hard to put it into words and it may be hard to live in it, I'm happy I'm living in it here with you, rather than being anywhere else in the world. And I hope, thank you for the follow, Holy Hitbox. I do hope that we can find a way to continue to be here for each other in these times. They're scary times. Loved ones are being taken off of the street. We are being made to turn against each other by higher powers who wish to see us crumble beneath them. Things are terrifying. Our loved ones are being persecuted for who they are by people who believe that the only way to have any true power or any lasting impact on the world is a negative one. The American government has been going to absolute horrifying lengths to ensure that people remain afraid and complacent of what they are doing. What is happening in Minneapolis right now is, I admit, I have not talked enough on stream about it as much as I would like to. We haven't talked about it, not because I don't want to talk about it, because it's always so hard to put the universe into words. But I think right now it's important to note that what is happening in Minneapolis and what ICE is doing is one of the most horrifying things I think I have ever lived to see in my lifetime. And all I can hope is that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and I can wake up one morning and this will no longer be happening. I didn't think growing up and reading about these things I was going to actually wake up one morning in a world where it is happening again. I believe that the people of Minneapolis are some of the bravest people on planet Earth right now. They are continuing to do something that we have read about in history books as a universal obligation of the common man. And a lot of people I love are being directly affected by this in ways that I never thought I would ever wake up one day to see. A lot of people we love are scared to fall asleep, scared to wake up in the morning, scared to go to work, scared to leave their loved ones at home. And while all of this is happening and all of us are trying our best to be there for people we love while we're terrified, absolutely terrified, all we can do is be there for each other and do what we can and try not to burn ourselves out. Because as I've been trying to explain to Sascha, you cannot make a difference if you have given all of yourself trying to make a difference. We will persevere. I truly believe we will survive and make it through this. But we do have to become a sort of different breed of ourselves in order to be able to manage what this throws at us. We must become more loving. We must become more understanding. We must find a way to have the ability to stand up and do what's right and say what's right, and we can't let fear choke us back. We have to stand up to do the right thing. And we have to talk about these things. And that's the purpose of these streams, is that we have to have a space to talk about these things, a time to talk about them, a group of people to talk about them with. The purpose of tonight's stream was, things are terrifying. Let's talk. And while we may not have talked a terrible amount about current events, about what is happening, a lot of you have been struggling as we have. And tonight, we gave you the best we could to make you feel like you were heard and understood. And for a little bit of time, you were safe. And while we may not be able to do much systemically to prevent the onward march of everything that is happening in this country. If we could make you smile, and if we could make you feel safe for even a minute, then it was worth it. And it was all worth it. I'm not entirely certain where I was going with this. This was one of my little attempts at trying to match Sasha's poetic and grand soapboxes with how she likes to talk about the power of community. But I do hope you all know that even if she wasn't fronting for most of the stream, this stream was healing for her. Because it reminded her that even if she is not absolutely grinding herself down to the bone and burning herself out, trying to be standing at the bedside of every person in her community who is struggling, which she has been attempting to do. She has been trying her best to be there for every person who needs her all at once, and it resulted in quite a catastrophic burnout today. Thankfully, that was all it was, but it helped a lot to show her that even if all she can do is give people a space to talk, a space to listen, a space to feel like they are safe, a campfire to sit down next to each other, that makes a difference. As long as there is a campfire to sit down and a space that we can talk about these things, that makes a difference. You don't have to die a revolutionary to make a difference. You don't have to be one of the people running an underground newspaper. You don't have to be somebody making some kind of grand movement from the inside of the government. You don't have to be somebody making these broad strokes in history to make a difference. Sometimes you just need to be there for people, and sometimes you just need to be willing to say the things that matter. And I think tonight we're doing that. It's really all we can do. I think I'm going to send you all on down to a friend of ours tonight. It'll be, since tonight's stream was something of a cold open, perhaps we can have something of a cold close tonight. We'll find a good friend of ours, send you all down there, and we can finally close up shop, and we can all get to resting. The campfire is beginning to burn out. Fuel is running low. I can't seem to find any kindling anywhere. But it's getting cold again. And perhaps this time, while it is wonderful to have you all sitting next to me at this campfire, it is wonderful to enjoy the warmth of the flame, the smell of the kindling and whatever else we've thrown into it, and the company of each other beside each other on these wooden planks, beds, masses of concrete. It is getting cold, and the fire isn't going to last a whole much longer. So, I'd like to ask you this time. At this point in the evening, could you follow me inside, please? And let's take shelter together. I'll be sending you on over to our beloved friend, LEOC, whose birthday it is today. I'd like you to give her the warmest birthday wishes you can, while she plays Power Wash Simulator with her friends. You may yet even see me join her, if I can. For tonight, we will be having the, we will be having the emote, or the raid of 80 raid. I'm not the best at picking raid messages, that's Sasha's thing, and she was attempting to figure out exactly what to even have me use, and I asked her to be as simple as possible. So, we'll be sending you over to Kelly. Her pronouns are he, him, and she, her. I will see you in Kelly's chat. Please be nice. Respect the rules. Respect pronouns. If you happen to have any infractions in her chat, you can be assured that you will not be returning here. We have a culture of accountability, and we will aim to keep it intact. But with that being said, this has been 80, and next stream, you will be seeing Sascha. She will be playing some Soma with our good friend, I'm Netta OK, who you saw earlier in the chat. I will give her a shout out here. But for now, I will see you over in Kelly's chat. Please give her the warmest birthday wishes imaginable. I hope you all have a wonderful night. Please be good to yourselves and be safe. And remember, you cannot make a difference if you burn yourself out trying to make a difference. Have a good night, friends.